There are moments when the soul speaks more loudly in silence than the mouth ever could in words. Yesterday may have seemed like just another day in the outer world, but within the hidden chambers of someone's psyche, something ancient awakened. A memory returned. A feeling long buried refused to remain in darkness. The image of you emerged, not merely as a person, but as a symbol carrying forgotten emotions, unfinished stories, and unhealed wounds. What we call coincidence is often the language of the unconscious. Sometimes, another human being becomes the mirror through which we confront the parts of ourselves we have tried to escape. And when that mirror appears with overwhelming force, the heart is shaken, the mind loses its certainty, and the soul begins demanding answers. Today, we are not simply asking what happened yesterday. We are asking why your presence echoed so deeply within another person's inner world. For when someone feels you more intensely than ever before, it is rarely just about love. It is about the invisible forces that bind two souls through memory, projection, longing, and the timeless search for wholeness. The unconscious does not erase what the conscious mind chooses to ignore. Experiences may disappear from daily awareness, memories may fade from deliberate thought, and emotions may seem to have lost their intensity. Yet beneath the surface, they continue to exist with remarkable vitality. The unconscious preserves emotional impressions, unresolved conflicts, forgotten desires, and abandoned hopes, waiting patiently for the moment when circumstances allow them to return. What seems forgotten is often only hidden. It remains alive in symbols, dreams, sudden emotions, unexpected reactions, and the strange feeling that the past has somehow entered the present without warning. When a relationship leaves a deep psychological mark, it becomes part of the inner landscape. Even if two people stop speaking, separate by distance, or convince themselves that everything has ended, the unconscious rarely accepts such conclusions in the same way the rational mind does. Instead, it continues weaving invisible connections between memories, emotions, and symbolic meanings. A familiar scent, a particular melody, a place once shared, or even an ordinary event can unlock emotions that have remained buried for months or years. These reactions often surprise the individual because they emerge before logic has the opportunity to explain them. The unconscious communicates through feeling rather than argument. It does not ask permission before bringing forgotten experiences into awareness. It simply presents them with unexpected intensity, making a person wonder why someone they believed they had moved beyond suddenly occupies their thoughts again. This is not necessarily a sign of weakness or obsession. It reflects the reality that emotional experiences become embedded within the deeper structures of the psyche, where time functions differently than it does in ordinary consciousness. What feels distant to the calendar may still feel immediate to the unconscious. Many people believe forgetting is an act of will, but psychological reality is far more complex. The more forcefully an emotion is suppressed, the more energy it often gains beneath awareness. Feelings that cannot be expressed directly frequently seek alternative paths. They appear in dreams, emotional impulses, recurring fantasies, or an unexplained sense of absence that seems impossible to define. The unconscious preserves emotional truth, even when conscious thought attempts to rewrite the story. This hidden memory does not exist merely to create suffering. It serves as a reminder that unfinished emotional experiences continue seeking understanding. Every significant relationship shapes the personality in ways that extend beyond visible interaction. The unconscious records not only what happened, but also what could have happened, what remained unsaid, and what the heart secretly hoped would become reality. These unrealized possibilities often carry as much psychological weight as actual events. For this reason, moments of unexpected emotional intensity rarely emerge without cause. Beneath every sudden remembrance lies a network of associations built over time. The unconscious recognizes patterns long before the conscious mind notices them. It connects present experiences with forgotten emotions, allowing the past to become active once more. What appears to be an ordinary day on the surface may coincide with an inner psychological movement that has been developing silently for weeks or even years. Memory within the unconscious is not stored like words in a book. It is preserved as living emotional energy. Every meaningful encounter leaves an imprint, and every profound attachment becomes part of the symbolic world that shapes future perceptions. When something in the external world resembles an earlier emotional experience, the unconscious responds immediately, reviving sensations that seemed permanently lost. The person may not understand why they suddenly feel restless, nostalgic, anxious, or deeply connected to someone they have not seen in a long time. Yet these feelings arise because the unconscious continues remembering what consciousness believed it had forgotten. Human beings rarely see another person exactly as they are. More often, they encounter a reflection shaped by their own unconscious world. Hidden desires, forgotten wounds, unmet needs, and unrecognized aspects of the personality are quietly projected onto those who leave a deep emotional impression. This process happens without deliberate intention. It is one of the ways the psyche attempts to reveal itself. A person who seems unforgettable is often carrying meanings that extend far beyond their physical presence. They become a living symbol through which the unconscious tries to communicate what has remained unseen. When someone occupies this symbolic place within another person's psyche, every interaction gains a significance that cannot be explained by logic alone. A simple conversation may feel life-changing. A brief glance may linger in memory for years. Even silence begins to speak. The unconscious is not responding only to the individual standing before it, but to the deeper psychological image that individual represents. This image is woven from memories, expectations, childhood experiences, personal ideals, and emotional longings that have existed long before the relationship itself began. Carl Jung described projection as one of the most powerful forces shaping human relationships. The qualities a person struggles to recognize within themselves are often discovered in another. Sometimes these qualities are admirable, such as strength, compassion, wisdom, or confidence. At other times, they involve fear, vulnerability, rejection, or emotional pain. The other person becomes a mirror, reflecting hidden dimensions of the psyche that have waited patiently for recognition. What creates such powerful attraction or emotional conflict is often less about external events and more about what the unconscious is finally able to see through that reflection. This explains why certain people leave impressions that refuse to disappear. Their presence activates forgotten emotional structures that had remained dormant beneath conscious awareness. Suddenly, the individual feels understood without explanation or challenged without obvious reason. They begin questioning themselves in ways they never did before. Old emotional patterns rise to the surface, inviting examination. The relationship becomes more than a meeting between two individuals. It becomes a meeting between the conscious personality and the unconscious aspects seeking integration. The mirror is rarely comfortable. It reveals beauty alongside insecurity, hope alongside fear, and love alongside unresolved pain. The individual may believe they are reacting entirely to another person's actions, while in reality, they are also responding to their own hidden emotional landscape. Every disappointment, every moment of longing, every surge of affection carries traces of the inner world reflected back through the relationship. The stronger the emotional response, the more likely the unconscious has invested the other person with symbolic meaning. When yesterday brought an unusual intensity of feeling, it may not have been because anything dramatic occurred externally. Instead, something shifted within the psyche itself. The unconscious may have recognized a pattern, awakened an old memory, or connected present circumstances with deeply rooted emotional experiences. In that moment, your image became more than a memory. It became the mirror through which unresolved emotions demanded attention. Thoughts returned unexpectedly, emotions resurfaced with surprising force, and the inner dialogue that had once fallen silent became active again. Such experiences reveal that relationships often serve a psychological purpose beyond companionship. They expose hidden truths about identity, longing, fear, and transformation. The unconscious selects symbols capable of carrying these truths into awareness, and sometimes another human being becomes the most powerful symbol of all. The person is no longer remembered only for what they did or said, but for what they awakened within the depths of the soul, where forgotten parts of the self quietly wait to be recognized and understood. Within every human being exists a hidden dimension that rarely receives attention during ordinary life. It is the part of the psyche that holds rejected emotions, denied desires, unspoken fears, painful memories, and aspects of the personality that do not fit the image a person wishes to present to the world. Carl Jung called this hidden realm the shadow. It is not inherently evil or destructive. Rather, it contains everything the conscious mind has pushed into darkness because it was too uncomfortable, too painful, or too contradictory to accept. The shadow waits silently, influencing thoughts, emotions, and behavior from beneath awareness until circumstances bring it into the light. Relationships possess an extraordinary ability to awaken this hidden dimension. A person who touches the deepest layers of the psyche does more than create affection or attachment. They disturb the balance the conscious mind has carefully constructed. Their presence begins exposing emotions that were believed to be resolved and insecurities that had long remained hidden. The individual may suddenly experience jealousy, longing, regret, fear of abandonment, or overwhelming affection without understanding why these feelings have become so intense. These reactions often signal that the shadow has begun to move. The shadow does not emerge randomly. It responds to emotional significance. When another person reflects qualities connected to unresolved experiences, the unconscious recognizes the opportunity for confrontation and growth. Old emotional wounds begin resurfacing, not because they have returned from nowhere, but because they have existed beneath awareness all along. The relationship simply becomes the catalyst that allows them to rise into consciousness. Yesterday may have appeared ordinary from the outside, yet internally something meaningful shifted. A forgotten emotional pattern became active once again. Many individuals mistake this awakening for weakness or emotional instability. They believe something has gone wrong because they suddenly find themselves unable to stop thinking about someone they thought they had left behind. In reality, the psyche is attempting to complete unfinished psychological work. The shadow does not seek punishment, it seeks recognition. Every emotion that has been denied eventually asks to be acknowledged. Every painful memory seeks understanding rather than endless suppression. Until this process begins, the same emotional patterns often repeat themselves in different relationships and circumstances. The shadow frequently disguises itself through projection. Instead of recognizing hidden fears within themselves, people attribute them entirely to another person. They may believe the other individual possesses all the power, all the control, or all the responsibility for their emotional state. Yet much of this intensity originates from within. The relationship has simply illuminated what already existed beneath the surface. The shadow uses emotionally significant people as mirrors because they reveal truths the conscious mind has avoided for years. This inner confrontation is rarely comfortable. It challenges personal identity, exposing contradictions between how individuals see themselves and what they actually feel. Someone who believes they have completely moved on may discover profound sadness beneath their confidence. Someone convinced they no longer care may find themselves emotionally shaken by the smallest reminder. These experiences reveal that the unconscious measures emotional reality differently than conscious thought. It values authenticity over appearance and emotional truth over intellectual certainty. When the shadow awakens, Dreams often become more vivid, memories return unexpectedly, and emotional reactions grow stronger than logic can explain. Small events begin carrying symbolic weight. Familiar places evoke forgotten feelings. Ordinary moments trigger profound reflection. The psyche is attempting to restore balance by bringing hidden material into awareness, allowing the individual to encounter parts of themselves that have remained invisible for too long. What appears to be renewed longing for another person is often intertwined with a deeper encounter between the conscious self and the neglected dimensions of the soul that have patiently waited for recognition. Pain is often misunderstood because the conscious mind treats it as an enemy to be eliminated as quickly as possible. It seeks distraction, explanation, or escape, believing that emotional suffering serves no meaningful purpose beyond discomfort. Yet, from a psychological perspective inspired by Carl Jung, emotional pain is rarely meaningless. It is one of the most persistent ways the unconscious communicates with the conscious personality. When an emotion refuses to disappear despite every effort to ignore it, the psyche may be signaling that something important remains unresolved. The intensity of the feeling is not merely a measure of suffering, but also an indication of the significance of the inner conflict demanding attention. Every emotional wound contains information about the individual who carries it. Grief reveals attachment. Fear exposes vulnerability. Regret uncovers forgotten values. Longing points toward unmet psychological needs. Rather than existing as isolated experiences, these emotions form a symbolic language through which the unconscious attempts to restore psychological balance. What appears to be emotional chaos often represents the beginning of greater self-awareness. The psyche is drawing attention toward parts of the personality that have been neglected, denied, or hidden beneath carefully maintained identities. When another person becomes the center of overwhelming emotional pain, it is tempting to believe they alone are responsible for every feeling that arises. While relationships certainly influence emotional life, the unconscious often uses them to reveal much deeper psychological realities. The suffering attached to one individual may also carry traces of childhood experiences, earlier disappointments, unmet emotional needs, fears of abandonment, or forgotten hopes that existed long before the relationship itself. The present emotional experience becomes connected with layers of memory accumulated over an entire lifetime. This is why certain relationships affect people with extraordinary intensity. They do not simply create new emotions, they awaken emotional structures that have remained dormant beneath awareness. Yesterday may have become emotionally overwhelming because something within the psyche recognized a familiar pattern. A memory, a symbol, a feeling, or even an unconscious expectation resurfaced, connecting present circumstances with unresolved experiences from the past. The conscious mind notices only the immediate emotion, while the unconscious understands the far deeper network of associations producing it. Pain becomes transformative when it is approached with curiosity instead of resistance. The unconscious does not demand perfection, it seeks honesty. Every uncomfortable emotion asks a question that the conscious personality has postponed answering. Why does this memory still carry such power? Why does this absence continue to feel significant? Why does one person's presence or distance create emotional reactions that seem larger than the situation itself? These questions invite the individual into a deeper relationship with their own inner world, rather than encouraging endless focus on external events. Transformation does not occur because suffering exists. It occurs because suffering reveals what had previously remained invisible. The individual begins recognizing emotional habits, unconscious expectations, recurring fears, and hidden desires that have silently shaped decisions for years. Instead of viewing pain as evidence of failure, they gradually understand it as evidence that the psyche is attempting to complete an unfinished process of growth. Emotional discomfort becomes the doorway through which greater psychological integration becomes possible. The unconscious continually moves toward wholeness, even when the conscious mind seeks only immediate comfort. Every painful experience carries the possibility of revealing forgotten strengths alongside hidden wounds. Within disappointment may exist resilience that has never been tested. Within loneliness may emerge a clearer understanding of authentic connection. Within longing may appear insights about personal values and emotional truth that could never have been discovered through comfort alone. Pain, when understood symbolically rather than merely resisted, becomes less a punishment and more an invitation to encounter the deeper dimensions of the self that have quietly waited beneath the surface for recognition and transformation. People often describe meaningful encounters as accidents, fortunate coincidences, or unexpected twists of fate. The conscious mind prefers explanations that preserve the illusion of randomness because they seem simple and predictable. Yet from a Jungian perspective, the deepest human connections frequently arise through patterns that cannot be fully explained by ordinary logic. Beneath everyday events lies a psychological order in which certain encounters possess profound symbolic significance. These meetings seem to arrive at precisely the moment when the unconscious is prepared to confront forgotten truths, unresolved emotions, or neglected aspects of the personality. What appears to be chance on the surface may carry hidden meaning within the depths of the psyche. When one person enters another's life with unusual emotional force, the experience often extends beyond attraction or affection alone. Something within the unconscious recognizes a familiar psychological image. This recognition is not based solely on appearance, conversation, or circumstance. It emerges from symbolic patterns formed throughout a lifetime of experiences. Childhood memories, emotional wounds, ideals of love, unmet needs, and forgotten hopes combine to shape an inner image that quietly influences whom a person finds significant. When someone resembles that image in meaningful ways, the unconscious responds with remarkable intensity. This response frequently surprises the conscious mind. A relationship that seems ordinary to outsiders may feel life-changing to those involved. Thoughts become persistent. Memories grow vivid. Emotions appear stronger than reason can justify. The individual may wonder why this particular person has affected them so deeply, while others have not. The answer often lies in the symbolic role that person occupies within the unconscious. They become more than an individual. They become the living expression of hidden psychological material seeking recognition. Carl Jung believed that meaningful coincidences, which he described through the idea of synchronicity, reveal connections between the inner and outer worlds that cannot always be reduced to simple cause and effect. Certain events seem linked by meaning rather than by direct physical explanation. A dream occurs before an important meeting. A forgotten memory returns on the same day someone unexpectedly reaches out. A particular song begins playing just as thoughts of someone become overwhelming. Whether or not these events possess objective significance, they often carry immense psychological meaning because the unconscious organizes experience through symbols rather than linear logic. Yesterday may have felt unusually powerful because multiple inner processes converged at the same moment. A forgotten emotion resurfaced. An old psychological pattern became active. A symbol connected the present with the past. None of these experiences required visible external change. The most important movement occurred within the psyche itself. The conscious personality noticed only the sudden emotional intensity, while the unconscious recognized a meaningful convergence that had been developing silently over time. Such moments challenge the belief that relationships are determined only by external compatibility or circumstance. They suggest that human beings are also drawn together by unfinished psychological tasks. One person may awaken courage in another. Someone else may expose hidden fears, reveal neglected strengths, or bring forgotten wounds into awareness. These encounters often feel destined, not because the future has been predetermined, but because the unconscious recognizes an opportunity for growth that the conscious mind cannot yet understand. The significance of these connections does not depend on whether the relationship continues or ends. Their deepest value lies in what they reveal about the inner world. Every emotionally meaningful encounter invites greater self-knowledge. Every powerful attachment reflects something waiting to be understood within the psyche. When someone continues to feel another person's presence long after physical distance has grown, it may indicate that the unconscious is still engaged in a process of integration, using the symbolic image of that individual to illuminate forgotten emotions, hidden desires, and deeper truths that gradually lead the personality toward greater wholeness and psychological understanding.